Welcome to the POG Show. I'm your host, Christine Martindale, Public Information Officer for the City of Port Orange, a city in Central Florida that is unique by choice, not by chance. I will be bringing you powerful interviews and on-the-go info to gain a better understanding of the various services and functions our city provides. So let's get started. Hello, everyone, to episode 006 of the POG Show. And Happy New Year. This is the first episode back in the new year, so I hope everyone had a great holiday, and I'm so glad to be back with you in 2021. So I'm going to start this episode off with a question. Do you know the city of Port Orange has a forest? Port Orange owns more than 10,000 acres and shares the rest of the property with Volusia County. And this is why it's often referred to as the city forest, because of its large areas of conservation land, timber, habitat for endangered species of plants and animals, and reclaimed water lakes. So to expand on this a little further today, I have with me in the podcast studio Mr. Steve Edgar, the city's forester. Hi, Steve.
How are you doing?
Good. It's so nice to have you on the show with me today.
It's exciting.
So I know that you have been part of our city for quite some time now, as I've always been referred to you on many different occasions because you are always a wealth of knowledge in so many areas. So how long have you been with the city of Port Orange?
Christine, I worked as a contract city forester for about 30 years. Then I was recently hired full-time as the Port Orange City Forester, and I've worked in that capacity about a year and a half.
So tell us a little bit about your background before arriving to the city.
I grew up in DeLand, Florida. I studied forestry at the University of Minnesota, then went on to work for the Division of Forestry as Volusia County Forester. Things were a lot different then. Our control burning throughout the entire state has been, not the state, but the Central Florida area has been shut down due to air quality. But when I was first a county forester, there wasn't any regulations on control burning at all. They found a kind of a safe weekend and put me in charge of the Volusia County area, put me up in the fire tower, and my job was to look for wildfires. Well, I found one. And I reported it in to headquarters, and then I got in the truck with the bulldozer on it, and I drove to the fire. And it was backing nicely through the woods, and so I started plowing, and I plowed and I plowed and plowed, and I finally came up with a fellow on a horseback, and he was dropping kitchen matches. So not only had I put out my first fire, but I was about to catch an arsonist on my very first time. Well, things turned around when he pulled the .38 out of his saddle holster and pointed it at me and asked him why I was putting his fire out. So the forest investigator had to be called, and he negotiated my release, and I had to smooth out the fire lines and relight the gentleman's fire. So we have changed a lot since then.
Wow, I can say so for sure. And, I always knew you had a wealth of knowledge, but always loving hearing your stories, because I never knew that. I've been with the city just about 4 years, and something I learned, something new every day. I mentioned in my intro about, our forest is more than 10,000 acres in size. And so maybe if you could expand to our listeners, just tell us a little bit more about our city forest, because people here in Port Orange, they know Dunlawton, they know US 1. They probably don't even know that we even have a forest here in Port Orange.
Most people are surprised to find out about it. It's located west of Tomoka Farms Road, south of I-4, and north of State Road 44. Geologically, these lands were formed as sand dunes in coastal waterways when the sea levels were much higher, and this land formed the ancient beach. The uplands support mostly native pines. If you were walking with me and we'd start at the wetland edge, you'd first see a slash pine flatwood forest. That slash pine growing with mostly palmettos in the understory. As you move higher on the ridge, walking a little bit uphill, we'd see longleaf pine and wiregrass. And then as we walk higher on the kind of gently sloping ridges, on the highest ground we'd find sand pine growing with a scrub understory. This is the same kind of ecosystem you see in the Ocala when you drive from Ormond Beach over towards the Ocala on Highway 40. All of these are fire-dependent systems and require periodic fire to remain in native condition. The wetlands on our forest are interesting as well. There's a large swamp between DeLand and Port Orange known as Tiger Bay. It was once like the Halifax River. Now, with a lower sea level, it supports cypress and hardwood forests. There are areas of organic soil up to 80 feet deep in places. These often have stands of loblolly bay, black tupelo, and white bay growing in them. And they've got a thick Leonia understory, all kind of laced together with cat's claw vine. To get through those areas, you really have to crawl on your stomach through the game trails. So we call that kissing snakes when you're crawling through that type of ecosystem. We also have a kind of a unique area of cypress called a hat-rack cypress growing there. These are dwarf cypress, natural bonsais. Sometimes they are over 100 years old, but are only 8 to 10 feet in height. All of these systems are joined and swirled together in broad ridges that move lower as you move to the west, and then eventually the land disappears into the deep swamp of Tiger Bay. It's a unique system, and the interaction of fire and water shape these systems and define the plant communities, and then the wildlife are also defined that depend on the plants for shelter and food.
So in depth and detailed. Our listeners listening may be thinking, wow, I'd love to visit. Is this something where residents or citizens can visit these wetlands?
The city's been working on that, and I'm sure we could put together visits or tours through the park department if that was enough people were interested. Right now, there's a one-way road and really not facilities for the public, so we haven't had the budget to accommodate that. It's also our primary water production area. Our well fields are located in this location, and there's some pretty heavy restrictions to protect public water source areas, and so those requirements would need to be met as well.
Now it's good to know, because I know this is so interesting, and that'll be the first question we get, right?
Sure.
Oh, how can we visit? I want to visit because it is beautiful out there. I've taken a tour, being a city employee, just taking a look at what our city offers, and the wetlands are a very pretty area for sure. So thanks for capitalizing a little bit more about what encompasses all our acreage out there. I did want to talk a little bit about prescribed burns for
Sure.
a minute, because lately we've had some prescribed burns, because I can tell with some of the smell in the air over the last month or so, or a couple of months, just smelling like, oh, there's a prescribed burn going on. So if you want to elaborate a little bit about what we have in prescribed burns. I know it helps the habitat for wildlife and control with invasive plants and weeds, and I know a healthy forest is one that is burned often, but if you want to elaborate just a little bit about prescribed burns, I think our listeners would love to know.
Sure. Many people see the smoke and might get a little ash on their car or pool and are inconvenienced by this. But fire has been in this system for thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. All the plants and animals have adapted to them, and the native plants that occupy these systems can't really function without fire. It's an important part of the natural system, and all the native ecosystems in the southeast were shaped by it. Most of the uplands averaged a fire about every 3 years. When the naturalist William Bartram described this part of Florida in the 1770s, he said you could see a cow in the woods over a mile away. Now you're really lucky to see a cow 10 feet away. So with fire protection has come really heavy undergrowth buildup. We learned that the hard way in 1998, that we don't really choose if an area in Florida is going to burn. We can choose when and under what conditions. The best way to replicate a natural system is to reintroduce fire under controlled conditions and to repeat the burning to match that original timing. That requires training and care and causes that inconvenience. It's impossible for most wildlife species to even survive without this burning. They can't eat pine straw. They can't get through the heavy, thick palmetto. If it's hard for people to walk through, it's hard for deer and turkey and the gopher tortoises and all the other native species. So it's something that's really required, but missing from a big part of Florida.
And what's really the best time for prescribed burns? Is it usually like in the wintertime, kind of where we're at right now?
Because we often have heavy buildups. I mean, most of the control burning is in the winter when things are cold. A pine tree can only take 140 degrees for about 3 minutes before it starts to be killed by the temperature. Our object is not to kill the trees, but to set back the understory. So burning in the winter is easier. Most of the fires naturally occurred in the summer, and we'd like to replicate that, but it's hard to find dependable winds. Like today, we know the wind is going to be coming out of the north, but when there's thunderstorms, it can blow from all points of the compass, and that makes burning a lot more difficult. As we get more and more burning accomplished, we can burn under different conditions, and if I can get a burn finished by noon, that would allow us to do it in the summertime. And they call those growing season burns, and they're really recommended by the biologists, and we're working hard to accomplish that.
So that's really good for listeners to know, because we'll get calls. I know when they're coming, like, oh, we're going to have a prescribed burn, and we're good at putting that out on social media. But for the most part, it's not anything kind of crazy. It's prescribed burns are, it's a healthy thing, like you mentioned. So it's always good for listeners to know, because they're thinking, well, what's burning? And so that is why. So it's really good to know. We talked about the wetlands a lot. Is there anything that you wanted to capitalize on the wetlands, just for a quick minute? I know that we've got about 5,000 acres of wetlands out there. So is there anything, I know we touched on it briefly just a minute ago, but is there anything else that you wanted our listeners to know here in Port Orange?
When Florida first started to develop, the cheapest way to get land really was to drain a swamp. In the 60s, we started to realize that we're losing these wetlands at a very alarming rate, and we started to protect them, and because of all the many wildlife and the hydrologic benefits. Now it's clear that we're losing our wild uplands at an alarming rate, so they're starting to be protected. But both wetlands and uplands are critical for wildlife, but it turns out that the places where they meet, they join together. Biologists call that edge, and that's really the most important and most valuable types of land. So we really need all of them. The city has established a wetland mitigation bank. It's about 5,700 acres, and it's dedicated to restoring and protecting the natural systems and habitats, with a particular emphasis on endangered and threatened wildlife. This bank wraps around the wells that protects the drinking water supply. So the land is protected with conservation easements, and it will be protected and managed forever in its natural state. And that's an accomplishment I'm really proud the city has really done a good job with that.
That's great. In fact, I've mentioned on our POG show before about our Citizens Academy that we do, and we've taken our classes out there just to take a look. So that's very fortunate part of the class that they get to go out and check out the wetlands, and they had no idea. They had no idea that it went that far back, or that the city owned something that far back. So very, very interesting. And in fact, I'm learning something new every day in terms of what you just told me. That's great. And switching gears just a little bit, I know that you also serve on an executive committee of the Florida Urban Forestry Council, as well as being the city's forester. So you want to tell us a little bit about what you do as you serve on that board?
The Urban Forest Council is designed to spread knowledge about how best to take care of and establish the trees in where people live, in urban environments. We are really lucky to have a city center that's almost fully shaded. I remember when we planted those trees, and they were quite small. We're struggling to keep them in place and healthy, because as they get bigger, the roots start to conflict with infrastructure. But that really happens throughout the city. We have sidewalks being cracked and asphalt being raised by the root systems. But we've also know, and studies have shown, that the places that people want to live have got trees in them, and mostly big trees. The places where people are the healthiest have got trees and big trees. And the U.S. Forest Service uses the Urban Forestry Council to disseminate grants and information to try to keep these trees in place, keep the shade, and keep it healthy. So as we grow, we tend to lose trees, especially the trees that are there originally. The city is really good at requiring trees in new construction. We're not doing a good enough job keeping and taking care of those trees, and we can do better. We're not doing a good enough job in helping our homeowners take care of and establish and understand the importance of the trees in their yard. Sometimes I see trees being removed because people don't like to rake the leaves. If they understood the full benefits of those trees, then I think it would be more. Our neighborhoods would be in better condition. So that's a part of my job, is to help business owners and homeowners take care and establish the trees in their areas.
Yep, proper education, and that actually is a good segue to my last question in terms of, how our citizens can get involved or be more engaged in this area. Are there programs, or it's just really being knowledgeable? But is there a way that they can actually take a part in helping? And
I think so. These trees at City Center were established because of public input. The tree buffers along the major highways were established because of citizen input and really demand. The first time I pruned these trees, the garden club almost hung me in effigy because they did not like anybody touching their trees. It was necessary pruning, but I had to explain that under duress. The best time to plant a tree, and this is a famous saying that I like. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, just like we did these trees at City Center. The second best time to plant a tree is today. Trees are important, and if we can find a place where shade or color or wildlife benefit is needed, we can plant a tree there. Picture what that tree is going to look like 20 years from now, and put the right tree in the right place so it will be there 20 years from now. There's nothing sadder than having large trees planted underneath power lines where we know they're going to have to be cut. So there are trees that can go there, but a big tall tree is going to have to be horribly malformed is not. So let's put the right tree in the right place, and check that the root system of the tree that's being planted is in good condition and not going to interfere with the growth of the tree down the road. If people have questions, they're welcome to get in touch with me. I'm a city employee now, and at their disposal.
And that was my next question in terms of how can they reach you? What's the best way that they can reach you?
Really by email. I think an email is it's sedgar@portorange.org. It's EDGAR, so they're welcome to contact me anytime. I can work with businesses and groups and neighborhood associations and individuals to get the right tree in the right place.
Right. So just to reiterate, it's actually at sedgar at port-orange.org.
That's right.
We always forget that hyphen, you know.
I do.
And I tend to do that too. So, and you know, we are just so fortunate here at City Center. If I know many of you here listening are in the Port Orange area. If not, come drive around City Center. It's just so beautiful. We've got just the best trees. We really do. And we're shaded, and it's just a beautiful area. So I just wanted to thank you. Is there anything that you wanted to add with our conversation? It's been very educational. I always like to bring guests on here that are fully knowledgeable on their trade and what they love to do, and I know you have a passion for this, so that's why I wanted to bring you on here. And what a good way to kick off 2021 is not only us being healthy, but our trees being healthy and our environment being healthy, and I think that's super important. So anyway, I wanted to thank you for coming on, and if there's anything you wanted to in closing.
Well, sure, Christine. Let's get you out in the woods again. Let's do one of these recordings in the forest.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that, because that's what your first question. Can we do it in the forest? Well, you know what? Maybe we can someday. That would be great. So I'd love to have you on again, Steve. And again, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate that. Well, again, there are other ways that you can learn about our city other than the POG show. The best ways are through our city's website, www.port-orange.org, our city's main Facebook page, Port Orange City Hall, and of course here at the POG show, which can be heard on iTunes, Spotify, or iHeartRadio. This wraps up episode 006 of the POG show. Until next time. Thank you so much for spending time with me today on the POG Show. We've only just begun, and with you sharing, subscribing, and leaving a 5-star review for this podcast is really going to help launch us to the next level together.